Okay, so distributing information, it is important to be in effective way and on time. It's important not to bury high crucial information. Do not be afraid to report bad information. And bad or good لازم has to be reported. Don't hide, don't cover problems, because if you do not communicate the problem as early as you can, it will be affecting the project negatively. Um, Oral communication via meeting and informal talk, it is important, um, help bring important information, um, good or bad, how to open. So oral via meeting, it is good ways usually, because uh, everybody share on the spot. It is very important to do face-to-face communication. Research say that face-to-face interaction, 50% of communication is through body language, 50%, and 35% communication through how the words are said, and 7% communication through the content or word that are spoken. Body language has more than 50%, and 35% how the word is said. Um, it's important how to rephrase your issues. You must pay attention to the word uh, someone is saying. You have to listen, you have to hear. Uh, Person tones also is very important, and body language say a lot about how they feel about an issue. And you need to encourage more face-to-face interaction. Must be short, مش الواحد. You don't get bored, long meeting and worry about it. You know, it is short meeting and more frequent. Uh, Short and more frequent versus long and less frequent. Uh, Short meeting, more frequent, very effective in IT projects. Stand-up meeting uh, force people to focus on what they really need to communicate. And some company also have policy preventing the use of email between certain hour to increase face-to-face meeting, because they know it's more effective. Email, probably you can leave it, you don't answer it, but when you interact with the person, one person with another, it probably will be more effective, and the issue will get attention more faster. Collaboration is something that you do among team. It is a key driver for overall performance of the company. So if the team is not collaborating, nothing will be done. Uh, More common uh, collaboration technique that provide high performance to company, um, such as web conferences, audio conferencing, and meeting scheduler. That's technology. Um, If you can take a look at this table, and this table basically it tells you uh, that which method of communication is more effective in which scenario. For example, if you take a look at, this here, uh, just let me maximize the slide. Uh, for example, mediating in conflict. Key one is excellent, two adequate, three inappropriate. So when you mediate in a conflict using a hard copy, using a hard copy is rated as a three, inappropriate. That means is not a good way. Uh, Telephone call is two, is medium. Adequate. Voicemail, not good. Email, not good. Meeting is very good. It's given an excellent. So when mediating a conflict using meeting, it is the best way to solve this scenario. Resolving a misunderstanding, in other words, telephone is the best way to resolve because it gives you an excellent in here. Whereas meeting is, and it's adequate, but the other method are really not a good way to resolve an issue. And conveying a reference document, hard copy is a good way, and website is a good way. For email, not really a good way for conveying reference document, and so forth. So media of choice is very important in how effective the communication will be. Okay, you must understand when you do your communication, group or individual, people are not interchangeable parts. يعني people you are dealing with, they're gonna be the same people. You cannot change them if you don't like it. So you have to stick with it. So your stakeholder cannot change it. Customers, your customer, you have to deal with them. You cannot change them. You cannot replace them. Um, just to explain how is impacted on the communication. Um, you just a myth that we can mention to understand that you cannot assume that a task originally scheduled to take 2 months of one person time can be done in 1 month by two people. To understand this myth, I'll give you another example. 9 women cannot produce a baby in 1 month. So this is the idea, is people are not interchangeable. If you have a task that is required uh, 5 people to do in 1 month, you probably cannot put 10 people to do it in 15 days. So this is, you have to understand when you communicating issues, you communicated the um, need for replacing individual or group, or because individual are not interchangeable. Personal preferences affect communication need. Mm, Introverts versus extroverts. Introverts, when a person like more private communication. Some people are more open to talk to one person because they trust, versus talking group because they're probably shy. Extroverted like to discuss things in public. Some people like to talk in public versus being pushed down when they are face to face one person. Intuitive versus sensing. Intuitive people like to understand a big picture. They don't care about the detail. Sensing people need step by step details. So you have to understand this person, she's intuitive, so you don't have to spend a lot of time giving the detail step by step, versus sensing, which is the opposite, people who want to step by step detail. There are thinker people and feeling people. Thinker people want to know the logic. يعني, um, well, I did this by creating a program. Thinker people will not take this as an answer. They want to understand which program, what program, how you did the program. Feeling people want to know how something affect them personally. Also, they don't care about the how thing was done, what is the decision behind it, why this decision being made. Um, um, does that affect me? I mean, I have to do anything or not? That's the feeling, people. There is judging or perceiving people. Judging people are driven to meet deadline, where perceiving people need more help in developing that following plan. So understanding that kind personal preference will affect the way you need to communicate issues. Other thing that you need to consider, sometimes interpreting a message is different from one person to another person, depend on different variables like geographic location or cultural background, uh, which this will affect, especially when you are into diverse environment, when you have different people from different culture, from different people. Believe me, when you create a joke, if I live this situation personally, because a joke that makes sense to me does not make sense to the American, to the Indian, and so forth. Also, you need to understand different working hour. Lots of time I had to work personally with people offshore in India, where there is big difference between US time and India time. I had to come to understand when to send the email, uh, and when to expect the reply. Sometimes I have to see the calendar at all the holidays in India, because if I am waiting for something and I and India they were in vacation, I have to know they're gonna be in vacation from this time to this time. I'm not expecting people to answer me this, so you have to understand the difference, working hours when you communicate. Language barrier, sometimes mm, the language. especially when you are an international company, you're dealing with the customers that is speaking Italian, for example. He has a very slim English, for example, or you're dealing with Arabic speaking customer in English and so forth. So these consideration you have to understand also. And I lived personally, I lived a very, very, very tough situation where I worked in a project in Ecuador. This customer does not speak any, not all of the clients that I dealt with that speaks English. We end up basically hiring a translator. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but it was not enough to really explain everything. So we end up hiring a translator to sit with in our meeting and to translate back and forth between me and the client. And different culture norm also. This is very important to understand. So there is a lot of into communication consideration. You have to consider a lot of situation when you do the communication to be successful. Um, Setting a stage for communicating bad news. Just want to tell you a joke. And here the other day I read, I don't know, social media, a friend, was asked to tell uh, his friend wife that yani, her husband died. And so he doesn't relay the information. He just don't want to go to his wife and tell her, "Hey, your husband died." So he has to yani, give little introduction to not make it short. So he went to the woman and tell her, "Hey, your husband has a girlfriend, or he got married to another wife." So she got so mad about him, and she told, she was wishing he will die. And then after that, he told her the news. Just like uh, my idea behind this, because it is supposed to be if I tell her to a person from different culture, he probably will understand. He will not understand this is a joke, because different culture has different perception for joke. Second thing is setting up stages for the bad news. So you have to give some introduction before you tell the bad news. Make your the person in front of you uh, think there is something coming up. Not one time you give them the bad news. It's an example in this slide. If you read it, you understand exactly what I mean by that. Just in general, don't give the bad news at once. You have to give an introduction to it. And how to determine the communication channels. I think we'll talk about this and we'll conclude for the day. And communication channels depend on the number of people involved in the communication. More communication, more people that involve increase, the complexity of the communication increase. If you want to communicate 10 people is different from when we want to communicate with two people. Two people is easy, but to communicate things with 10 people is going to be fuzzy and a lot of complex. There is increased complexity. And how to determine the number of communication channels? There is an equation. Let's say n is the number of the people that involve in the communication. Number of communication channels equal n multiplied by n minus 1 divided by 2. Give you an example. Let's say that we have two peoples that is want to communicate ideas. So number of channel needed is 1. How is that 1? You go to the equation. N equals 2 times n minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. So we need only one channel of communication. Let's say we have 3 people. Let's apply it on the equation. 3 times 3 minus 1, which is equal 3 times 2 is 6. Divided by 2 is a 3. As you see in the diagram, we need 3 communication channels for 3 people. Let's say we have 4 people. See, 4 times the 3 is 12, divided by 2 is 6. So we need 6 communication channels for people to be able to communicate appropriately. Clear? We'll stop until here and we'll continue tomorrow. Probably tomorrow we'll finish with project management communication.